Within just about a decade, our global economy has been hit by two major crises, the global financial crisis of 2008-2009 and the global pandemic crisis that began in 2019 and is still ongoing. The global financial crisis, as we know, had risen out of the actions of market players, bankers, and speculators. Their actions led to excessive buildup of debt and the risk-taking, resulting in the largest credit bubble in history. The global pandemic crisis, in contrast, is due to exogenous factors. These factors have hit the real economy directly, whereas the global financial crisis had primarily hit the financial systems. They have induced a downturn and the contraction of global economy expected to be about 5% during 2020. The COVID-19 crisis has hit us at a time when many countries, unfortunately, are still suffering from anemic growth and sluggish demand due to the global financial crisis.
So I'll talk first about the global outlook and also some Asia-specific issues, and then some very brief points on Indonesia and how the IMF thinks that the Indonesian economy can best be prepared going forward for strong and robust growth. So next, please. So as I think we all know, the response to the coronavirus pandemic in the US, globally, led to lockdowns that slowed down economic growth around the world at the beginning of this year. As those lockdowns began to be lifted toward the end of the second quarter, we did begin to see some recovery around the world. This recovery was particularly strong in China, which led the world first enter in the severity of the pandemic, but then also in its recovery. Lockdowns in China began to be lifted in February, while in Europe and the US it was much later. This outlook seemed quite positive over the summer, especially in Europe, as cases declined. But with cases rising quickly again in Europe and in the US, there's a great deal of uncertainty, and we're not sure what will happen. I think the main conclusion that we would draw from this is any global recovery from the slowdown related to the COVID-19 pandemic is likely to be quite slow at the global level. Next slide, please. As I said, the cases continue to rise around the world, and this continued rise, particularly in the US, where it's been going on for quite a long time, but especially more recently in Europe, has really affected financial markets in the sense that it makes people wonder to what extent the pandemic can be controlled before there's full deployment of a vaccine, and it's affecting growth expectations around the world. So the fact that lockdowns are now rising in Europe again has caused people to wonder to what extent the recovery that we began to see in advanced economies over the summer is sustainable. Meanwhile, in the US, cases remain high. The US never really came out of the first wave, and now it's entering a third one. So in the United States, there has been some recovery, but with the number of cases high, a new normal is a long way off. And finally, in Asia, while China has recovered relatively strongly, the situation in India and in Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, is quite uncertain.
In line with Mr. Walls, we can see some indicators showing that the global economy recovery is proceeding as expected. The rebound of global is on the back of extraordinary fiscal stimuli in several advanced economies. And the recent also gains have been boosted by economic recovery in China in response to large fiscal stimuli also, particularly in investment and a flattening of COVID-19 curve. In slide 4, it shows that the positive impact of global recovery to international trade activity, where trade volume and commodity prices increase. The improvement in prices for Indonesia's main export commodities was mainly driven by higher prices for palm oil and metal. This is in line with increasing demand from China. On the bottom left chart, we can see that iron and steel export to China increased. We don't have the chart here, but I want to say the increase also recorded for pulp and waste papers as well as textile and textile products. Endowed with export commodities, several regions outside Java recorded economic gains. In slide 6, we can see some regions started to record positive growth of export. The green color in Sumatra, Bali, Nusa Tenggara, Sulawesi, and Papua shows the positive growth in export in August. Export from Sulawesi, Papua, and Java improved on the back of demand from China. The stronger export, combined with fiscal stimuli, drive the gradual recovery of domestic economy. So in slide 7, August and September 2020 reveal higher government spending given the fiscal stimuli relating to social protections and small medium enterprises as support. These positive developments are reflected in a number of early indicators, including retail and online sales, that shows on figures on the bottom chart in the middle. From external sectors, slide 8 shows that trade balance surplus continues. In September 2020, trade balance maintained a $2.4 billion surplus, higher from $2.35 billion surplus on previous months. A narrower current account deficit is expected as export continue to gain momentum, while imports are still lower due to complex domestic demand. The surplus of trade balance support Indonesia's balance of payment remains solid.
Now allow me to begin with showing you Indonesia Islamic finance landscape. As of July 2020, total asset of Islamic finance, including Sharia compliant stock, have reached 1,639 trillion, equivalent to 111 billion $, about 9.7 from the total financial asset in Indonesia. The growth rate of the Islamic finance was fluctuate. In weeks 2017, the growth reached 26.4%, and in 2019, going slower, 13.8%, but in 2020 only 10.65%. I believe all of us aware why that's happened, because one of the reasons of this slower growth was due to COVID-19 pandemic. As of July 2020, the Islamic capital market asset reached 60.15%, followed by Islamic banking 33.12%, and Islamic non-banking financial institutions 6.73%. And the 60.15% market of Islamic capital now is dominated by Sukuk Negara. Sukuk Negara is the name of Islamic sovereign securities issued by the government of Indonesia. Next slide, please. Here I would like to show you the whole picture of Sukuk Negara development. We issued Sukuk since 2008 with a small amount of 4.7 trillion IDR, equivalent with $300 million in 2008. And from the graph on your right hand side, it shows that Sukuk Negara issuance increased gradually from year to year. Started in 2015, the issuance reached above 100 trillion IDR, and last year in 2019, the total issuance reached 258 trillion IDR. Compared to previous year, in this year, 2020, due to widening budget deficit as impact of COVID-19 pandemic, as of 15 October, the issuance already reached 321 trillion IDR.
So this slide just shows on the right hand side the volume of Sukuk. When I say international Sukuk, I mean cross-border Sukuk, which is available for all investors to invest in. So the international Sukuk market started off with very modest volumes back in 2002, with about $1.2 billion of Sukuk being issued, primarily from Asia and primarily from the government of Malaysia. But since then, as you can see in these bar charts, the volumes have grown significantly and successfully since 2002 to reach around $25 billion approximately, year on year in the past 3 or 4 years. The red part of these bar charts shows the Middle East contribution to the volumes, followed by the gray from Asia, and then there's some volumes that we see from Europe, primarily from Turkey. The points on the left-hand side summarize the key takeaways from the international Sukuk market. So for us in 2020, the volume of Sukuk issued internationally is expected to exceed $30 billion, and that will be a record year in the international market. By end of this year. The Middle Eastern Middle Eastern issuers account for approximately 75% of the volumes which are issued, and these primarily come from the likes of Saudi Arabia, the likes of UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, and so on. There are some markets within the Middle East which are developing in their Islamic finance footprint, and they include Oman, Egypt, and Jordan as well. From Asia, really the biggest issuer in international Sukuk is Indonesia. It has really significantly increased the volume of issuance, as we saw in the previous presentation, starting off in 2009 and then being a regular issuer in the market since 2013.
As explored in the first sessions, the development of Sukuk and other Islamic investment vehicles in the last decade has shown the growing significance of the Islamic finance industry to be part of the global economic development elements. However, the coronavirus outbreak, which has brought an unprecedented significant setback to the global economic development, also pushed back the Islamic economic and finance, which heavily attached to the real economic. In order to finance the capital needs, international Sukuk has grown to be one of the alternative instruments in the capital market, which is considered by both Islamic and non-Islamic issuers. Supply of international Sukuk are mostly coming from Middle East and North Africa region and issued in US dollar denomination, whereas the non-US dollar international Sukuk are quite limited to only about 4% of the international Sukuk holdings. On the demand side, high interest from investors to this global Sukuk issuance has generally driven oversubscription. We can see international participants has begun to increase in several issuance this year. In these sessions, we are going to discuss further about how to manage Sharia compliance portfolio. We are very blessed that today we have 4 prominent speakers representing the different aspects of the investment area. From the issuer side, we have Mr. Muhammad Istiak Akbar from Islamic Development Bank. From the investor side, we have Ibu Dr. Huriah El Islami from BPKH, Datuk Paduka Syed Masyafuddin Syed Badarudin from Principal Islamic Asset Management, and Mr. Johari Ali bin Abdullah from Aberdeen Standard Islamic Investment Malaysia Berhad.
So in terms of the presentation that I'll be making today, I'll start off by giving a very quick overview of the Islamic Development Bank Group, and then highlight the work that we've done in Indonesia to date. Then I will present some of the portfolio management practices within the group, mainly by the entities. But the focus of my presentation will be on the project portfolio management practices of the ISDB itself, with a focus on the public sector portfolio activities that we have around the world. I'll then link it up with some of the issues that we face generically, but also some of the challenges that have been brought up in portfolio management as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and then provide some conclusions as we move along.